We trust age. Age has come to symbolize experience and wisdom. It suggests time spent paying attention, lessons learned the hard way, responsibility carried over seasons. It feels earned. In leadership, experience often becomes a shortcut for wisdom. Years become credibility, longevity becomes authority, and that's usually enough. But many leaders eventually reach a moment where what made them successful no longer feels sufficient. It can actually feel like fatigue or pressure. And that pressure is in that tension we talk about between what you build and what you're built for. That's the tension I want to sit with today. Because age doesn't automatically equal wisdom. Sometimes it just means something's been around long enough to feel familiar. And maturity isn't about how long something has existed, just as impatience isn't always about speed. In whiskey, age statements promise maturity, but they don't tell the whole story. Leadership deserves the same level of honesty. If you don't spend a lot of time around whiskey, age statements on whiskey bottles are actually pretty important. For many people standing in a liquor store, the age printed on the bottle becomes a shortcut and a buying guide, a simple way to compare whiskeys. 12 years, 15 years, 18. When flavor, process, and craftsmanship aren't familiar, age becomes one of the clearest signals available as you evaluate a whiskey. It helps answer a practical question. Is this a good whiskey? And to be fair, the number does tell you something. The number printed on the label tells you how long the whiskey has been aged in a barrel before it was bottled. But here's a key detail that many people don't know. Unless a bottle explicitly says single barrel, the whiskey inside comes from multiple barrels that have been blended together, each with different qualities and characteristics. That's standard practice in whiskey making, and it's actually done intentionally. Barrels are filled at different times. They age in different parts of the rickhouse. They experience different conditions as they mature. When those barrels are brought together, the whiskey in the final bottle can include whiskey of multiple ages. That's why an age statements work the way it does. The age on the label reflects the youngest whiskey in the bottle. So if a bottle says 12 years, that means that every drop inside has been aged for at least 12 years. Some of the whiskey may be older. Some barrels contribute more character than others. Some play a small supporting role in the final blend. That number exists to give consumers a clear, consistent point of reference, especially when comparing one bottle to another. And that's the idea. Using a single visible signal to evaluate something more complex doesn't stop at the liquor store. The same instinct shows up everywhere else in our lives. Most of us were never taught how to evaluate leadership, ideas, or even our own readiness with much precision. So, like a novice whiskey consumer, unless we've taken time to learn how to evaluate, we reach for a signal, a hint as to the quality of what's inside. In leadership, those signals often look like years of experience, tenure in an organization, titles, reputation, or familiar names and voices. These become our age statements. And this way of evaluating can work for a while. In seasons of building, age and experience creates stability. They reduce risk, and they help success take shape. But the tension shows up when the season changes. When we move from building to stewarding, from momentum to meaning, and from growth to alignment, When age becomes the primary way we evaluate leadership, we actually stop engaging with the present moment. We default to what worked instead of what's needed now. We protect precedent instead of tending to what's forming. This is where the tension between success and significance really shows up. Success asks, what have you built? How long have you been doing this? What does the label say? Those are useful questions, but they're label questions. Significance, on the other hand, asks something different. Who have you become through what you built? What has this season actually formed in you? And is that being understood well enough to serve the people you lead? And there's another layer that's worth naming. When people don't know what's actually in the barrel, they don't have much else to go on. In whiskey, if all you see is the age statement, that's what you use. Not because it's a great indicator, but because it's visible. Leadership works the same way. When people don't know what's actually in a leader, what they value, how they decide, what's shaped them, they default to what's on the label. Their years, their titles, the tenure. Many times, that's what anyone has to go on. It's a limitation of what's been revealed. And that tension between what we built and what we're built for often shows up right there. I learned this lesson the hard way, very early in my career through a hiring decision. During a rapid growth period for the organization I worked for, I was handed the responsibility of hiring a new manager for my team. I knew what I needed on paper. I knew where we needed to go. So when I was hiring, I did what a lot of leaders do. I read the label. Years of experience, familiar titles, a resume that looked seasoned and proven. The whiskey age statement checked out. And because I didn't know yet how to look for or evaluate the blend inside, I assumed the years gave me everything I needed to know. So I hired them. It looked like a great decision. They hit the ground running. They were confident in meetings, and it felt like their experience would be enough to move the team ahead. But once they were inside the organization, their blend started to surface, just like a bottle being opened. Their experience didn't translate into alignment. The confidence they had showed up more like arrogance. And before long, a new asset became a liability, working against the systems we had in place. The team felt it. My boss felt it. Instead of helping move the department forward, my decisions set us back. And looking back now, I can see the team didn't just struggle with the hire, they struggled with clarity. And that reflected on my leadership. And that's how leadership often unravels. Not through sudden implosions, but through friction, misalignment. The number on the label didn't help me understand what had been blended together to create that experience. Different seasons, different environments, different expectations. That experience still reshapes how I lead today and how I help organizations and leaders gain clarity and make better decisions that actually serve their people, their organization, and those they serve. Age can help us inform a decision, but it can't replace understanding. When I look back on that experience, what stays with me isn't the mistake I made. It's how easy it was to make that mistake. And this just doesn't happen with hiring. It happens with ideas, with strategies, with advisors, and sometimes with how we evaluate ourselves as leaders. When things feel complex, unfamiliar, or pressured, we look for clarity in the simplest place we can find it. A familiar strategy. What's already been done? What has the path of least resistance? We read what's on the label. That instinct is human, and over time, relying only on those signals will create a gap. The gap between intention and impact, between who we're becoming and how we're actually experienced. And that gap is often where the pull towards significance begins. Rather than rushing past that, I want to pause here for a moment to notice what it reveals. The way we evaluate, what we trust first, can shape how we lead. When leadership is reduced to labels, people experience rigidity and distance. But when leadership is shaped by discernment, people experience clarity and trust. And over time, that experience changes more than decision-making. It changes how people feel, how aligned teams become, and how much room there is for growth in others and in ourselves. This is often the moment leaders find themselves standing between what they've built and what they're being asked to steward next. That's the invitation. If you've ever gone to a whiskey tasting, you write down notes of what you've tasted, things that stood out to you, and the things you want to remember. Here are my tasting notes from today's conversation. Yours might be different. Experience matters, but it isn't the whole story. Years and credentials tell us something real, but they don't fully capture how a leader has been shaped or predict how they'll act, decide, or impact the people around them. When we're unsure how to evaluate, we default to simple signals. That instinct works until it doesn't. It limits curiosity, narrows perspective, and keeps us from seeing what actually matters most. And significance begins when discernment replaces autopilot. When we look beyond the label, leadership becomes more grounded, more human, and more capable of creating trust, alignment, and lasting impact. Numbers matter. Experience matters. What you've built matters. In whiskey, the number on the label was never meant to be the only way to evaluate what's inside. It's meant to orient you, not replace curiosity, learnings, and intent for understanding. It's an invitation to learn more and get the whole story. Leadership works the same way. Success asks, what have I built? What does my label say? Significance asks, what has a season formed in me? And is that being understood well enough to serve others? Your life and your leadership is a blend. It's a blend of wins and missteps, of leading and following, of seasons that shaped you in ways no label can show. The number tells part of the story, but it's the blend that reveals who you are becoming. And learning to hold both, inwardly and outwardly, is the work of true leadership. Remember, clarity isn't found. It's crafted. Thanks for listening to Crafted Clarity. If you're a leader wrestling with the tension between success and significance, or you're trying to align your work with a deeper calling, I'd love to connect with you. If your organization is facing questions about strategy, whether it's alignment, ROI, or building confidence in your team, this is the work we do every day at iBrand. And if you walk this journey yourself, or maybe you're right in the middle of it, I'd love to hear your story and maybe even share it here on the podcast. You can find me at crafted clarity.net.